Salado, Texas, June 6, 2019. The time is 6:31. The agenda is before you. Call to order, June 6, 2019 at 6:31 and a half. Call of the roll. Secretary?
Mayor President Coachman.
Here.
Alderman Jafer.
Here.
Alderman Cole.
Here.
Alderman Condon.
Here.
Mayor Blancett.
Here. Our invocation is going to be done by Frank Wallace. Frank, I haven't seen you in a long time. How are you doing?
At least a couple of days.
Yes, at least. Good to see you.
All right, let's pray. Father, we are grateful for a beautiful day outside, a day to be together and a day to recognize you for all that you have done for us. And Father, we thank you for this place, this village that's so unique and such a great place to raise families and to be a part of community. And we thank you for the blessings of allowing us to be here and be a part of this community. And Father, I want to specifically pray thanks to you for the recovery of my friend Rodney Bell, and pray that as the days progress, we'll see even marked recovery continue. And so, Father, thank you for bringing him here tonight post his challenges. But, Father, we are so grateful for places that we can go when we have physical needs, and you've met those needs for him, and he is on a great path of recovery. And so, Father, we pray you bless him tonight. And the rest of our aldermen, as they do your work, we pray that you give them clarity of thought, clarity of speech, and may they do exactly how you would have them to do tonight as they conduct business in your name. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. We're going to have a special guest for the Pledge of Allegiance when we stand. Don?
Mayor, we're very pleased to start a new tradition, and that new tradition is going to be some students from the Salado ISD who will be coming and leading us in our pledges, both the Texas flag and the United States flag. And today we're pleased to have the better half of that Graham combo in town. Where's that at? And that's Davis Graham from the Salado ISD. Davis, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where do you go to school? What grade? What do you do?
I'm in 7th grade at Salado. Here, my dad is Jason Graham and my mom is Sarah Graham. My father serves in the Army, so it's pretty cool that I get to, or used to, is retired now. It's pretty cool how I get to do this.
He's living the luxury life.
Yes, sir.
You may remember Davis's face, or Jason's face, excuse me, as he is our alternate on P&Z. And we're glad for his service and appreciate all he does for this community. So, Davis, it's your show. We'll let you lead us.
May we stand, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. You may be seated, please. Well, it's a very special occasion when we get. It's a very special occasion when we get to do this. We're going to now do the oath of office for the Village of Salado to Rodney W. Bell. Rodney? In the name and by the authority of the state of Texas, Michael McDougal could not be here for the second one, so we're going to postpone that for another time. Number 3 is Zoning Board of Adjustment. Discuss and consider possible action regarding an appeal of the village administrator's decision regarding site development at 20 Creek Drive in Salado, Bell County, Texas.
Mayor, we'd ask that you make a motion to continue this item at the request of the individual who is appealing. He's unable to make it tonight, and we'd like to take it to the second meeting in July. The second meeting in July.
And you're asking for a motion?
Yes.
Okay.
So moved.
And a motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All in favor, raise your hand, please. Opposed, likewise.
Mayor, if it's possible that we can do it earlier, we'll try, but that's kind of the date we're shooting.
Okay. Folks, this is our agenda tonight, just to let you know that it is a full agenda. Citizens communications. We have a number of these tonight. And just in case you've never done it or you need to be reminded, there is a 3-minute limit in addressing the board. You have an opportunity to speak during this time period. Speakers desiring to speak on an agenda item will be allowed to speak when the agenda item is called, and we do have one for that. Inquiries about matters not listed on the agenda will either be directed to staff or placed on a future agenda for alderman consideration. Now, let me remind you, 3 minutes, and we will stop you. And number 2, speak to us, please. These are the folks who are going to make decisions, and we'll be listening very careful to what you have to say. Mike, would you keep the minutes for us, please? Okay, the first one, Mr. Charles Dunifer.
Charles Dunifer, my wife and I own the Antique Rose next door. What I wanted to discuss was the on the agenda relative to the wastewater and the possible action regarding the request to modify the manner in which the monthly wastewater bill is calculated for Barrels Brewing. Over 100 businesses on Main Street were forced to connect to the sewage system. The vast majority of us did not need that connection. And it's going to, by the time all the fees are added up, it's going to cost each one of us about $10,000. The Stagecoach got multiple exemptions and regress from the city. No impact fee, no connection fee. We decommissioned their sewage plant. I mean, that is money from us, the people here of Salado, the businesses, subsidizing another business. This is wrong. And now Barrows is coming hat in hand asking for a break too. I mean, if they give that kind of break to the Stagecoach and to Barrows, all of us should get the same break. Otherwise, we're just subsidizing them. And this board, not all the people on this board, and a lot of you are new, this board has made some very, very poor decisions relative to giving certain businesses breaks, in particular the Stagecoach. It's not fair. It's not right. That's it.
Thank you very much, Charles. Thank you. Linda Reynolds, please.
Linda Reynolds, 507 Santa Rosa. First of all, I want to thank you, all of you, for your service and let you know how much I appreciate seeing a full complement of aldermen here. And thank you, Rodney, for working so hard to get back. It's an honor, I know, to serve the community, but it's a great burden also. I was speaking with a new member of the Planning and Zoning Board the other day, And the person mentioned that we ought to be putting some pressure on the sanctuary. One of the reasons so much is people are being, it costs so much for businesses, is the sanctuary has not come through. I'd like to recommend to Don that along with, and I know this is a little silly, he always has a lot to say, but I think we need a report about the sanctuary every meeting, even if it's they're doing nothing. It came out on Salado People. Somebody was saying they moved into a new house out in Salado Oaks and just wondered what's going on. There was a tremendous amount of sarcasm and borders on rudeness, I suppose, about the sanctuary. I would just like to start putting pressure on the sanctuary to come through with some project. Right now, that land, while we're all getting higher taxes, I was just at the tax office this morning, the sanctuary has agricultural land, and I don't know if any of you know about that land, but that's the tax bill on that land is very, very minimal. 300 acres plus are in this community, need to be developed, and we need to know how much the roads and the fire and the police and everything will cost us. But we need something done there. And I think we need you all to start putting pressure on that community. And I would like a report every month from Don, even if it's they're doing nothing yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Dr. Lewis Raney.
Mayor, Alderman, also Alderwoman Amber. And Amber, I'm going to avoid talking about deer tonight. But anyway, I was sent here by the people on DeGrumman Way. With this last flood, there is a creek that runs in front of the library. It runs by Brookshire's. It crosses Van River. It goes on across Mill Creek, and it ends up in front of my house. Everything in the world washes down there. I'm telling you, we get rubber tires, we get all the brush. But anyway, I have talked with Shane, the fire chief, and we have to burn about every 3 or 4 months. We have to burn a lot of that debris, and we're asking for that that you waive the permit that costs $20. We just spent $2,400 on a pump for the well, and to have the fountain run in that pond 8 hours a day. It cost about $30 to $40 per month just to run the electricity on that pump. And so Shane agrees with me, and he's been doing this for years. And he inspects it in the same spot every time. He thinks that we ought to be able to do it and have no fee, and probably he doesn't even need to come over there and look at it. We've had no problems in all these years that I've been messing around with it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, I want to say, the mayor has my personal amplifier, and I can hear every word that he says on the front row. It's a great product, and I'm going to retrieve it, but I don't want to leave it here. Thank you.
Thanks for bringing that, Dr. Lewis. Thank you. Tim, please.
I think I'm a little bit taller than your previous two speakers. I'm Tim Fleischer. I live at 912 Cedar Park Circle. I want to speak to you about something that I would like the board to consider in the future as an ordinance, which it has every right to create ordinances and to change them and to do away with those ordinances. I would ask that the Board of Aldermen seriously consider amending its impact fee ordinance to grandfather the existing properties. There was no consideration given to this. The whole purpose of impact fees is to provide alternative funding when taxpayers are unwilling to pay for infrastructure for future growth. According to your own $40,000 study, the existing properties will account for less than 20% of the capacity of your total 200,000 gallon per day treatment center. They'll account for less than 40,000 gallons per day. Two things have happened when you created the impact fee ordinance. You created different classes of property owners and different classes of business owners. You did it by considering those who were not tied into the Stagecoach sewer at the time of connection to be new development. This is, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many people in Salado, a false qualification to define properties that have been in Salado for decades to be new development. The impact fee is usually applied at the beginning of a development, when if it is a subdivision, it applies for a subdivision plat, or if it is new construction of commercial property, it applies for a building permit. None of the 100+ properties that are going to have the impact fee applied to them would willingly apply for a building permit. They are being forced to apply for a building permit. They are being forced to tie into the sewer. There is a great piece of information from the National Association of Home Builders, and I would like to refer to page 65 of that. I'll make sure that you have that document. Some of the common errors of impact fee technical studies. The number 3 common error is funding offsets are ignored or improperly applied. The funding offset of the $10.55 million bond that paid for the infrastructure was completely ignored in the impact fee study done last year. And it was done so because if you take 200,000, I'll finish up in 30 seconds. If you take 200,000 gallons and divide it and you get the living unit equivalent, the impact fee will retire the complete bond. So no consideration was given to the $10.5 million, nor was any consideration given to the $1 million in federal grant for this sewer for the customers downtown. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Tim. Thanks very much for the citizens. As I don't know if you've ever gone through one of these, but we cannot reply to anything. But we all take notes very carefully. So don't be surprised if you see some of this come up after, not during, because we have to stay with the agenda, but after or the next time that we meet in a workshop. Okay, thank you very much for that. The consent agenda, number A, approval of minutes of the regular Board of Aldermen meeting of May 16, 2019. B, approval of minutes to the special Board of Aldermen meeting of May 16, 2019. I will entertain a motion, please.
Move to approve the consent agenda, both items.
Is there discussion? All in favor, raise your hand, please. Opposed, likewise, passes. It's time for the status reports, and these are always very interesting. Don, you're the first one up.
Yes, sir. Mayor, members of the board, members of the public, let me run through several items because we have a number of other reports to hear tonight. First of all, status report on the wastewater project. Approximately 24% of the properties in the service area have made payment on their wastewater impact fees and are connected or are in the process of being connected to the wastewater system. So we're seeing an awful lot of activity. I think it's safe to say that we'll not have everybody connected by July 1. So I think you're going to have an item at your second meeting in June to talk about how to deal with that particular issue and whether to allow maybe a little bit more time for some of those individuals who have initiated the process. We'll certainly put an item on there for workshop and even potential action. Initial wastewater bills were mailed out to those customers connected to the system last week. We received a cost estimate this week on the Royal Street wastewater main extension. That's, of course, is going to be the line that will be installed that will go to the new development off of Royal Street. The estimated cost is $190,362. That cost would basically be borne by two property owners, the Shelton property and the new subdivision. The Methodist Church will tap that line as an alternate to the connection we've already provided to them because it's a little bit easier to get to that line from that perspective, but they will not be having to cost share that. Final wastewater connection to the Stagecoach property to the new wastewater system is nearing completion if all goes as planned. We're hoping to get that done by the end of next week. And the projected date for the connection of the Salado ISD properties to the wastewater system is mid-August. Staff's report on the legislative session's impact. As you know, our friends in Austin just wrapped up a couple of months' worth of work, and this session was a pretty active session, particularly in relation to matters relating to municipalities. Depending on who you talk to, will tell you the magnitude of adverse impact of their work. I want to touch on just a couple of the big bills that we've seen, and everybody's still kind of post-morteming everything right now as bills are being signed and those type of things, and people are learning more and reading more about what's happening. Probably the biggest one that we've heard all sort of so much publicity about has been Senate Bill 2, and that, of course, was the tax relief bill. And that particular bill lowers the property tax rollback rate, now called a voter approval rate, no longer called a rollback rate. And the reason why is basically if you choose to go over the 3.5% mark as far as your tax increase goes, that means you're obligated to go to the public. It's not a petition, it's an automatic election to go to the public to see whether they would approve such an increase over that 3.5%. The one bit of relief is for cities under 30,000. Most cities under 30,000, there's a guaranteed $500,000 levy increase for most cities under 30. The big cities are squawking, obviously, because they're way beyond this mark. But I think you're going to hear an awful lot as far as the pain. The good news about this is there's a deferral on this situation. It will not go into effect really until our next budget year as opposed to this budget year. At least that's the way it appears at this stage of the game. Senate Bill 1152 is kind of an interesting bill. It allows cable and phone companies to stop paying the lesser of their state cable franchise or telephone access line fees. This is part of an ongoing movement to go in and to basically continue the deregulation process for cable and for the phone industry through state regulations. How will this impact us? It will have an impact on us because clearly we're going to be the lesser of those, as far as that goes, and we'll see a little bit of a hit. We don't get an awful lot of money off our phone and off our cable. Our big franchise providers right now are electric, and then we get some pretty decent money from our garbage providers. House Bill 852. This one is kind of an interesting one, and this one's the one that's really impacting cities extremely hard and quite frankly rather quickly because this is an automatic go into effect bill. The others will all come into effect at later dates. 852 is a bill that prohibits cities from calculating their residential building permit fees on the cost of a proposed residential structure improvement. That means cities must immediately come up with an alternative way to calculate their residential building permit fees. This went into effect when it was signed. We're kind of in an interim mode. Everybody's feeling their way through this at this stage of the game. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be going back through. We will bring you at your next meeting a proposed alternative method to calculate. And then what we will do is we will go back from the effective date of that bill and those permits that we've issued, we will go back and issue refunds if we need to issue refunds if there's a difference in the way those fees were calculated. We're looking at basing the bills or basing the fees on the square footage of a structure and looking at establishing a cost per square foot for the building permit as opposed to looking at a total value of the permit. We also keep in mind in our city have another equation that some cities don't have, and that is we have a cost recovery piece that we need to take into consideration because there's $75 worth of an inspection fee for every time an inspector goes and does that, and that needs to be borne by the permitting individual and not for the taxpayers as a whole. So we're working on that solution. You'll see a package that will come to you at your next meeting on that. And then Senate Bill 621 is another one that you're hearing an awful lot about in the next couple of days. The squawking really hit high pitch on Monday of this week, and that is a bill that basically is the sunset bill for the board of the licensing board for plumbers. And in effect, this particular bill has set up kind of I think an unintended consequence, and that is it's going to set up the elimination of state regulation of plumbers in the state of Texas. Right now, up to this point, plumbers had to be licensed by the state of Texas. That was a requirement if you work in the village to be licensed in the city. You had to show you were a licensed plumber with the state. The state takes the regulation of plumbers pretty seriously, and they should, because quite frankly, plumbers have a huge impact on all of our lives, be it water, gas, whatever. So what they basically have said is, we're going to let this lapse, and cities, if you're concerned about that, you can assume that responsibility and begin regulating. It's something Rodney and the school board has been dealing with for years as far as these unfunded mandates they dump back, and now they're starting to take target on cities on this type of issue. The governor earlier this week, after the plumbers union and the plumbers people stood loud and called for a special session, the governor came back and said that they're working quickly on a solution to this that will not require a special session and will hopefully delay the elimination process as far as the licensing requirements go. We'll see, but he's promised something in the next few days. But these are some of the things we're looking at, and you're going to be seeing some of the impacts of those, and we'll update you as we get through more of the bills that have been passed. Staff's report on the Main Street Improvement Project. Crews have started an installation of stormwater pipe in front of the Stagecoach Inn. This work's expected to be complete in about 2 weeks, weather permitting. They're going to be working down there, and then they'll jump across the creek and continue to work on the west side of the road up to Thomas Arnold. The site preparation work, meanwhile, is underway on the northern end of Main Street. You see where they're breaking up the asphalt so they can get themselves staged to put pipe in, and then come in with sidewalk on top of that and lights. The contractor work pattern we've mentioned before is south to north in an X pattern. They're basically coming on the west side of the street, going to Thomas Arnold. They'll jump across to the east side, go all the way to Salado Plaza, and then come back down south and do the east side, jump to Thomas Arnold over to the west side, and go all the way to the interstate. At least one lane will remain open during construction. So far, traffic has seemed to work pretty good from a pattern standpoint. Keep in mind, the Main Street Bridge, or should I say the Main Street area of Rock Creek, will be closed for approximately 40 days starting January 5th, 2020. The traffic detour will be in place to maintain traffic flow around that area. We think 40 days is a long shot. We think they'll be done sooner than that, but that's the date that they put in the contract. And again, the total price tag of the project is about $5.2 million. Everything should be complete hopefully next summer. So we're kind of anxious to see how things start to progress and that goes. Staff's report on the Salado Creek gravel removal project. The May flooding, as you know, deposited large amounts of gravel at different locations on the Salado Creek. To remove the gravel deposits, a permit's going to have to be secured from Texas Parks and Wildlife. The village staff has briefed TPWD folks on the issue, and we're in the process of submitting an application to remove approximately 5,700 cubic yards of gravel from the creek. The primary target removal area is going to be just up from the South River, the South Ridge low water crossing. That's the one-lane low water crossing where we had probably the most significant deposit load. We need to get that out very quickly so we can keep that road open longer in times of rain. Because right now it's full of gravel, which means that road, even with some of the lighter rains, is actually going to end up topping, and we're going to end up having to close that. Cost estimates for gravel removal, we're in the process of gathering those as we speak. Status report on the ESD proposal. That's the Emergency Services District proposal. We talked about that at our last workshop. Alderman Coggin, the Salado Fire Chief, our fire inspector, myself, met with Bell County Judge and Commissioner Whitson to discuss possible future creation of an ESD, Emergency Services District, for fire protection in the Salado area. The boundaries for that area would basically be the coverage area right now of the Salado Volunteer Fire Department. The discussion that day at the courthouse centered basically on the petition process required to initiate the election, required to create the ESD. It is a required public vote in order to create that district. It is a taxing district that has a cap on how high the property tax can be, but all of those funds go into paying directly for fire services. The consensus of the parties at the table that day was that really any ESD petition should be initiated by a steering committee of taxpayers and not by any public official or entity. The thought process is the entities could serve as resources and provide the data to the steering committee that they need to go out and educate people and to gather the petitions. From a standpoint of timing, we talked a little bit about that in the workshop. Right now, it looks as if probably the best target date for the election on this is going to be November 21, as opposed to this coming November. The county only has the authority to call elections, on certain years as far as May elections go, and the feeling is November 21 is probably a good time frame to get this particular situation called. So that's basically what we have. I want to give the first report on sanctuary that was requested tonight, and what I would like to tell you is that this afternoon at about 3 o'clock, the engineers for the sanctuary project delivered the construction plans and the construction plat for phase 1 of the sanctuary development. That's a 66.21 acre phase of the development that'll contain some 183 housing units. So we're in the process of reviewing that and comparing that to the development agreement and beginning the engineer review process on what they've submitted. We'll keep you updated as that situation goes. Now, the other thing I would like to do is offer my personal thanks on behalf of the staff and on behalf of the village also to those volunteers who last weekend worked out in Pace Park for a few hours in the morning before high school graduation, picking up flood debris as they gathered a significant pile of debris that we will be having chipped in that particular area and left on site. So thanks to those volunteers, Keep Salado Beautiful in particular, who spearheaded that movement to begin the flood debris cleanup. So that's all I've got, Mayor.
Are there any dates as far as sanctuary is concerned? Dates, right, when they would begin, if they will begin, what's that? Okay,
It's all going to be contingent on the review.
okay, very well.
How many
The
homes?
66-acre tract, so you know, is that tract that basically is catty-corner to the Methodist Church. It's basically the access area where we were going in and out to get to the treatment plant.
How many homes was that?
183 units is what's in the first phase.
I have a couple of things. The first is, I know that you said that you're coordinating with Parks and Wildlife on the gravel removal project. Did they notify Army Corps of Engineers, or is that something separate that we do?
They'll be involved in that.
So they'll be the
process, yeah.
petitioner, okay. The other thing is, with your information on the extension after 1 July that you said may be on that next agenda, could you add some discussion of not only extending that, but revisiting the impact fees?
Sure,
Just revisiting that, just so
absolutely.
we can open discuss that again.
Absolutely, and I'll have the consultant here for that who did the study, and if you have any questions for that person, because I know some of you have not had an opportunity to visit with that consultant too.
Don, one other question, did you hear anything about, I know it went through both houses of the Texas legislature, but did the governor sign on contractors who go over their time and the money going to the village? Not this village, but,
Salado bill?
yeah.
Yeah, the 482 was that bill. That bill did pass both the House and the Senate without really any opposition. So we have all the confidence in the world that if it's not signed, it obviously automatically goes into effect. So it's through, and you know, we're comfortable with that. That particular bill, just so people understand that bill, and they truly do understand that bill, and that is it's a bill that really came out of what we went through in Salado with the interstate project, where there were penalties that were part of the state's contractor that they ended up having to pay to the state. The state put those back in their general funds. And that particular piece of legislation passed this session set up a process to the point where in those communities where the state's contractor, you know, ends up having to pay penalties for delays and inconvenience issues, that instead of the penalties going back into the state's general fund, the TxDOT general fund, those funds would be assigned to the TxDOT district where the damage was done, if you will, and they would be spent back in that district where the damage was done on further improvements, as opposed to going back to other TxDOT projects and other state uses. So it doesn't go back to the communities that were damaged, but it goes back to the TxDOT district where those communities are located, and then you would think common sense would say that they would try to spend that money back in the community that was damaged. Yes, that bill did pass, Mayor, and you testified, and I think they were very appreciative of your efforts on that.
Well, that's good. I'm glad it passed because it shows that Salado always thinks of others and sets an example for others. Okay, Salado Police Status Report.
Can we ask one other question?
Surely, I'm sorry, Rodney.
On the wastewater project, since bills have started flowing, when will we start seeing P&L statements or some kind of statement showing cash flow for that system?
You'll start getting those. It'll more than likely end up being, you'll see it, it won't be in this upcoming month's financials, it'll be the following month's financials that'll report on July, basically. So you're probably 30 days out from starting to see true flows.
All right. And my other thing is I'll tag team with Amber because I want to see the impact fee stuff too.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think we're also probably going to schedule a briefing with our FA, our financial advisor, to come in and talk to you about the bond issuance, so everybody understands the debt we have out there and the debt service and the options and alternatives.
Now, Don, we had one of the citizens that asked about Stagecoach getting breaks on the sewage tax and everything.
Yes, sir.
Can you just do a quick overview of that, about how we arrived there?
There was a development agreement that, and I was not here during the time, but there was a development agreement that the board adopted with the Stagecoach relating to the redevelopment of the Stagecoach Inn. And the developer agreed to make a certain financial commitment back into the community as far as the redevelopment. And in return for their expenditures and their redevelopment of that property, the reopening of the hotel, the reopening of the restaurant, the village granted some concessions. In relation to wastewater, the concessions were that they would not be obligated to pay any impact fees. They would basically be connected to the system, connected by the village at the village's cost. So that's the permanent connection that we've talked about the last couple of meetings. They will, however, be paying the same rates, monthly service rates that everybody else is based on their water usage. And they will be a high impact user, as you can imagine, with the hotel and with the restaurant. There are other concessions the village particular agreement you'll be seeing once we get the permanent connection complete. The process will begin to bring to you paperwork relating to the transfer of the parking lot, because part of the deal was that that the Stagecoach treatment plant was there. That was parking lot was public property at that point. But upon completion and upon decommissioning the plant, the parking lot area and the area where the plant's was located will become Stagecoach property. The city will retain ownership of the creek frontage, so that park, the Serena Park, will be continue to be publicly owned and publicly accessible. They also are obligated to provide us with an easement to allow for public access down to that particular area. The details of that will be worked out at the time we work out the land transfer. One of the things that's going to be a little tricky with that access point is obtaining ADA access down there. And quite frankly, you don't have enough money to build an ADA access point going down from the Main Street Bridge down to that water. And you don't have enough room, I doubt seriously, to do that. So I think there are going to be some difficult discussions with them on how we gain access down there to that area. But they're obligated to provide us with an access easement. There are some other agreements, other parts of that agreement, Mike, that we worked out relating to hotel occupancy tax and marketing.
When was this agreement made? Is this 3-year-old agreement, 5-year-old? I don't know.
4 years, 3 or 4 years old, something along those lines. Before my time, it is.
There's no way we can really go back and say, hey, we want to revise that agreement as in concrete, correct?
Yeah, it'd be difficult. There are issues with that agreement, and we talked about that, but I think both parties decided that the best thing to do, considering all things, was to move forward with principles and spirit.
John, I want to ask you one question about the sidewalks. I know that's a little worked into here, but is TxDOT going to add a place going across that bridge for handicapped?
No, sir.
They're not.
Nothing is being done to the Main Street Bridge, despite some of our neighboring media outlets. And Tim has been the only one who's presented an accurate picture of what's happening with that project as far as the bridge.
I didn't hear you.
But nothing is happening with the Main Street Bridge. So ADA access, no. Now, I will tell you this, the sidewalks will be ADA accessible. There'll be ADA ramps at each of the intersections where people can get onto those, but nothing on the bridge.
And on the Main Street, I see some barricades that are up in front of some of our businesses. I thought the TxDOT people were not going to be limiting our access to our businesses.
They're working with those businesses where the barricades are to try to minimize impact. They're trying to limit how much barricading they put out at this stage of the game. But Stagecoach is probably the most notable area where the business has been barricaded. And we actually were able to work with TxDOT. Stagecoach called us up and had some concerns a couple of weekends ago about they had a wedding planned and they were concerned about barricades being up, and TxDOT was able to move those down. We actually told TxDOT that they may want to think about starting this project off on the right foot. And if they didn't have contractor working in the next 2 weeks like they were saying, that you ought to give them a break and move them for the wedding. They're back in place now because the pipe has arrived and they're installing. And as I said, it's not going to be too much worth of work in front of their place. It should be about 2 weeks worth of work, and they're going to work to maintain access to some parking areas for them as well as possible. Yes, sir.
Any other questions or comments for Don? Salado, please, status report. How bad?
Sir?
For our selection, I'm getting fancy here. So this is for 5.5 years working at the college teaching classes, so you're going to have death by PowerPoint tonight. Okay, this past month in May, We had a total of 301 calls for service. Of that, we took 50 reports, 14 supplements to either this 50 cases or prior cases. Wrote 69 citations, issued of those 69, 48 were warnings, and we had 4 arrests, 2 by warrant. The response times, priority 1, priority 2, priority 3. Priority 1, we had 5 minutes, 13 seconds. Priority 2, responding 5 minutes, 19 seconds. And priority 3, 2 minutes, 37 seconds. I think with the priority ones, those are normally going to be, we have a slide on the difference, but we'll talk about that in a second. Calls for service, as you can see, this is from January till now, each month. Calls for service kind of dipped down a little bit. Again, some of those calls for service are actually officer initiated as well. We have fewer officers right now until we get fully staffed. Those will go back up a little bit. I'm going to continue this pattern with the year, and then as we get through this year and into next year, I'll show a comparative analysis for past years. I wasn't here prior to April, so I'm going to start it this year. We got our citations versus warnings. Again, just showing the difference from 2019 citations versus warnings. This past month we took 9 crash reports, and those are up and down. As you know, the highway dictates a lot of the crashes and so forth, so those are variables that we can't control. To define priority 1s, priority 2. Priority 1, this is something that's immediate response needed, life-threatening. Could be an example would be a crash with injuries. And again, you look at the time, the response time, the problem you have with the response time, an example being yesterday morning, about 10:30, 11 o'clock, we had a major crash right past Thomas Arm on the highway. Officer Dunshee was downtown over here. I was at the office. To get to that location southbound, we had to go all the way down to Amity to cut across the highway to get back on the highway. So you can see how, and then the traffic backed up. Response time is time dispatch to the time of arrival. So, trying to manage that is difficult, especially when you're dealing with response on the highway, and if you're on one side of the highway, or when we had the water crossings covered this past month, that really inhibited how quickly we could get to a call, and we're not going to sacrifice for speed or danger to our officers. It doesn't do us any good if they get a wreck on the way there. So, priority 2s, these are not necessarily meet the level of priority 1, obviously, priority 2, but this is something seen and secure. This may be something, an example of a theft, a burglary, where unknown if the residence has been cleared and suspects may not be present, suspicious circumstances, somebody calling about an unusual activity in their neighborhood. And just so you know, priority 1 something can be a priority 1 from the initial call and change to a priority 2, even down to a priority 3 based on circumstances, scenarios changing and so forth. The priority 3 is going to be your non-emergency calls. Typically routine, I don't like using the word routine, but in this case, a routine call is something, a disabled vehicle, a road hazard, it could be even a welfare concern. And that welfare concern actually go from a priority 3 to a priority 1, if somebody's injured or needed medical assistance as well. And your response times, just to show the difference between response times, and we hope to get those numbers as we get fully staffed we get there a lot faster, so we'll do our best. The COPS program, we're working on the Are You OK program. If you're familiar with what's going on in Belton, the Are You OK program. We're working on how to apply for it. Once a person applies for it, it could be a family member or somebody that lives in the neighborhood. It's normally for seniors, somebody to check on them. They can assign, ask for it, be called specific times of the week, or once a week, or even every other day. The call is made to them by one of our COPS volunteers in those time frames. Something as simple as picking up the phone and answering, "Are you okay?" And they say yes. They don't have to do anything further. If they want to continue the conversation, knowing our volunteers in the COPS program, we'll probably have some conversations, which is good. But if somebody doesn't answer, we'll send a response. Officers will respond, and possibly to check on them as well to make sure that everything is okay. And Belton has saved several people's lives through this program, and that's why we're jumping on this. HEAT program, the state discontinued the HEAT program. This is to help out with that, but we can do it. They basically said communities can do it on their own. So the HEAT program is going to be Salado specific. If people want to sign up for the program, We're developing a sticker that will be specific to Salado. If the vehicle's out between, say, the hours of 11 p.m., 5 a.m., they're going to give us the authorization to make a traffic stop without probable cause or reasonable suspicion. This sticker alone gives us that right to, by that person's permission who owns the vehicle, to stop that vehicle. If it's the owner of the vehicle and they just happen to be out, have to go out during the night, everything's good. If not the registered owner of the vehicle, we'll be contacting, and it could be somebody that's stealing the vehicle. And they have to agree to it and so forth. Just looking at time frames. The original help out that was the stops were between, I believe, 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. We'll expand that here for our communities. It tends to slow down later in the evening. Some of our outreach this last month, we provided car escort show for the car show for the NG Club. We assisted with a walking parade for the 18 to 22-year-old special needs school over by Salado ISD, back here off of West Village. They ended up they did a walking parade in school, elementary and junior high, all went out there and kind of lined the streets. It was really nice. Some of the 18, 22-year-olds were graduating from the program, so they went over to Johnny's for a luncheon, so we helped them out with that. Officers responded, or went to the Peace Officer Memorial over in Killeen, the ceremony last month. They're out there working the barbecue on Main. I presented at the Lions Club. I was actually coming out to the Lions Club, so getting involved in everything. Social media, Officer now Castillo, she had her name officially changed, so Sonia Castillo. So you're used to seeing Sonia Castillo now. She's working on our social media, and so we try to keep that updated. She posted something last week about the deer and so forth, and just anything we're involved in. We're trying to keep the word out and respond to anything the citizens may have. And also, like I said, thank Tim as well. Tim, so we did more compliments. This week, we were in the Village Voice. This week, next week, we'll be on the paper. But if you know anybody that lost some narcotics in the Sefco parking lot, please have them contact us so we can make sure we return to the proper owner. The person will have to describe the narcotics and what they were placed in, so we can make sure that person gets their narcotics back. And we'll make sure their picture gets in the paper that we recovered it. Any questions?
Any questions for Pat, please?
And how's the staffing level?
It's looking good. I just gave Don a background packet. We're going to be doing it next week for our sergeant's position. Somebody I feel real comfortable with. I think you would really like to hear about it. Everything's going well, and I'm still working on trying to get an officer. Sorry. I was talking with the Lacey Lakeview Chief, John Truitt, yesterday. He's having just as much, if not more, difficulty than we are. He's losing officers left and right, and he can't hire anybody. And so it's a tough time for a lot of law enforcement agencies. Everybody around here is having a hard time hiring officers. So we're doing our best, looking at different programs. I was talking to Don about the Army Transition Skills Grant program that we can possibly look at getting into, and this is long term because it's not anything that's going to happen overnight. But when I was at the college, the DFW Airport Police got on the program, and it's basically you get a soldier within, they're about 6 to 8 months out from getting out of the military. You put them through the process. You basically are hiring them, but not hiring them. They're still under contract with the military. They're still being paid by the military, medical and so forth. The military guarantees them that time in the academy, the 5 months that they're assigned to the academy. Once upon graduation, they do their final out, get out of the military, and they come and work for that agency. So it'd be a way for us to save money, but also give back to the community, keep a soldier in this area, and somebody that's dedicated their time to the civil service. Keep that going.
I had a question for you. What's a big reason you can't we're having trouble finding officers and maintaining them?
There's too many openings and not enough officers right now. And I know the college has put the academy. I started. They just graduated on June 1st, but all 30 of them were actually hired by agencies, so I couldn't even recruit any of them. So the agencies that have the resources and funding, they're filling their slots. But locally in Central Texas, a lot of the agencies are having the same problem we are. So, we're competing against larger agencies, more money, and so forth. So they can't complain. I think really we're sitting really well with a lot of our equipment. better than most larger agencies. So, we have some benefits that some larger agencies don't. Obviously, pay is always a big thing, and that's what drives a lot of people into the position. And we're getting people getting into the job because it's a job, and not getting into it like I did for a career. You hear that a lot. It's a job. It seemed like a good, something fun to do or whatever, but for me, it was my career. It's just a change in attitude right now.
Even DPS is having difficulty finding officers, and one of the big problems they're encountering, I can talk about that, but one of the big problems they're encountering is we have a lot of agencies from outside the state that come in and recruit heavily. New York being one of those that come in and recruit heavily in communities like Dallas and in this area, and they take away a significant number of folks. So
New York, Washington, LA, the state of Washington, Los Angeles County, all of the agencies are coming to this area because Fort Hood, you got soldiers there. I forget what the number was. I know several thousand getting out of the military every month from Fort Hood, and just as many coming into Fort Hood being assigned there.
So what do we have to do to make people want to come?
Pay got better. I tell you, it would be a lot easier to attract the qualified applicants. The applicants we have received, trust me, they're not people that we want working here. We call them job hoppers, gypsy cops. They go from one agency to another. They stay someplace long enough to realize that the agency realizes that they don't need to be there and they leave. And I look at people when they come and they contact me, and I look at their job history with law enforcement. And as somebody who's worked in 10 different agencies in a 6 to 8 year time frame, I don't want somebody like that because he's not going to guarantee me he's going to be here long. I am actively recruiting officers that I know personally that are in the process of getting ready to retire. You get somebody that's retired, already has a source of another secondary income. Those are people that would love to come to a situation that we're in here. So it's just a matter of finding the right people and making sure they want to do it.
John, the other issue you run into is the activity load, and that is the younger cops a lot of times, want to go where there's going to be quite a few more calls for service and a lot more action and activity as opposed to Salado where the activity level is not as significant. The pace is a little slow.
That's probably young people. Yeah, I think it's great people.
Absolutely.
And I am actively recruiting those who, there's a couple guys and ladies that I know that are in that process where they're not at the time where they pull the plug with their current agency. And I know if I had them at the right time, they would do it in a heartbeat because they worked with me before and they know what to expect. So.
I have one more question, and then I'll shut up. On the news, you see about, and I'm going to use it, I hate to use the term, active shooter. Do we have a plan in place in case that hits Salado? I'm starting to worry about that.
Yes.
It's popping up more and more.
And the officers they've all been trained on how to respond. All the agency, if some, God forbid, were to happen in this area, the amount of officers that would show up here, along with our own officers, and there's ways to respond even with one officer. When I started the training, when I was one of the first instructors for clean on active shooter training. I used to train, you didn't go in until you had 5 or 6 officers, and that's not the case anymore. We're going right in. You're the only one there. You're going in ready to go. So it's a matter of stopping the threat. So it's an immediate response.
So you are joined at the hip with the state police and the sheriff's.
Oh, yeah, I guarantee you that so many troopers in county and probably Belton and Gerald, if something were to happen, the call would go out. But it wouldn't be a matter of waiting for them. If I was the first one on scene, I'm going in. Period. So, and you see not negative publicity what happened in Florida, but you're not going to see that from our officers.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, please, Pat?
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Salado Fire Chief status report. Hi, Jim.
Mom, bring your slideshow, Shane. Put my slideshow up, please.
Yep.
That's it right there. I got calls 30 EMS calls in the city. We had 20 in the county. We had 1 fire call in the city. We had 7 fire calls in the county. We had 7 motor vehicle accidents in the city. We had 9 motor vehicle accidents in the county. And that's my report for the month.
Questions, please, to the chief?
Chief, on the Grumman Way, the $20 burn fee, and how that process goes, do you have a recommendation on it?
No, it doesn't matter. I think there's one other group that, that's been okay to let them burn as needed, that do a bunch of cleanup around town, so, it doesn't matter to me, whatever y'all decide, but if it's a bigger group that's actually doing some cleaning up and stuff, I don't have anything against them being charged with permit.
So you understand the revenue generated by those burn permits eventually goes to the fire department?
The city gets $5 and we get 15. So permits are $20 a piece. And usually I go out and do all the permits. So that's it.
Any other questions, please?
I have a question regarding that. So if 15 is going to the fire department, and only 5 of us move to the village, what would be wrong with, if Shane has to go out there to check it prior to burn, then that be straight $15 and then the village should pay? We're not even going out there, right?
Yeah, I assume the way the fee was set up in the beginning was to try to cover any quote-unquote processing effect, but I would tell you there's really not a process. I'm going to be honest with you. We have so few of them in the course of a year, I don't even know why we have a fee. I think it's good to have a permit to cover the base, and I'm not meaning to take, I mean, if you
No,
want
I mean, we get, I think like, I mean, it's $200-300 bucks. I mean, it helps, but it's about $200 bucks a year is what we get.
But you're making trips out there to look at it?
Yeah, I mean, I drive out to every person that turns in a permit. I drive up and I look, make sure they're not trying to burn stuff they're not supposed to.
But I mean, you guys have a cost in fuel and man hours.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think maybe that's something that we should relook at and see how we can directly benefit them without it benefiting the village in some way if we don't really have a dog in that
I
fight.
could give them the whole 20 if I mean, if you want to do it. I mean, I just think at the end of the day, I mean, you got to look at what you're doing for the citizens, you know, in that situation. And if it's $300, maybe you add $300 to their annual contract cost and let the citizens just simply pull the cost per permit. You're paying for it. I mean, helps them. But we don't, the city doesn't see any reason for our costs.
Okay, thanks very much. Tourism Director's report. Hi, Chad.
Hello, how are you?
I'm well, how are you?
Doing well, doing well. So first thing I want to mention, I had lunch today in Georgetown with, I guess, a new co-op, if you will, with the, I guess you could call them the group of destinations or cities that are north of Boston, from Cedar Park, Leander, to us. And I said this before when I met with folks with the Texas Travel Industry Association. The people who have been around for a little while, they're, I think, a little bit excited to see that Salado is involved again, and is that I'm, you know, that we're doing things, and that Salado is not dying like everyone thought they were. So, anyways, good news there. So that co-op hopefully will come. We'll be able to, you know, work with them. They'll share leads with us as we start pursuing meetings, which is something that we'll start to do next year. We'll probably start to directly market to specific markets, like meeting planners and things like that. So with that in mind, we're actually being featured in Texas meetings and events, starting to build that relationship with the editorial team there, hopefully get more stories there. It's a small one this time, but who knows what that'll end up being. Other advertising efforts, we're going to be featured in San Antonio Magazine this summer as well, and then have some ad space and some sort of marketing efforts happening with Houstonian Magazine. The reason we went with Houstonian Magazine was because of all the attention that our digital advertising is seeing in Houston. They are most reactive to our ads. They're clicking on them more. They're staying on the website longer. They're more engaged with what we're doing in Houston. I mentioned that before previously. And of course, I like for the new members. We like Houston. I like Houston as an audience because it takes commitment to get from Houston to here. It's not a 2-hour trip down 35. It's a 3.5 hour trip down 290, maybe up 71, however you drive here through back roads. It's more of a commitment. You can't just come here for the afternoon and go home. And so that hopefully convinces them to stay over. And then that's pretty much it for the marketing plan update. I have the next bit. We've got some photos we're going to show you. This was a part of our budget from this year rather, and it's an ongoing project. Can you pause it real quick? I want to do it. Yeah. It's an ongoing project that we're not really anywhere near complete. We have a photographer that's basically spending time with us coming to Salado. I can't tell you how many times. A couple things I want to mention. This is not an exhaustive showing of the photos. There are hundreds of photos. This is just a selection of 30 of them. Our goal with this is to try to capture the experience of Salado, the spirit of Salado, and that includes all of its characters and its attractions. And so some of these photos you'll see a little bit more artistic, creative license was taken. They're probably meant for more social media to have fun with, and some of them are more sort of general that can be used in print ads and things like that. So I tried to collect 30 of photos to give you a good idea of what we're doing. So yeah. You'll notice we don't have much money, so we can't pay models. So we have to collect them on the streets. So anyways, you'll notice there's a lot of things missing from that, but I hope you have a better idea of what we're trying to do with that. I've learned through this process the meaning that photography can give to a place, or rather, it can help illuminate the meaning of a place. And that's what we are trying to do as tourism marketers, is to try to show people that meaning. And you can't do it without photos. So it's been a fun process. You've probably seen me around Main Street. You probably have seen me around Main Street running around with the photographer trying to get all of our shoots in. And So the last bit is just about events. This weekend is Texas History Days. Please come out if you have the opportunity. Homestead Heritage is going to be there. There's activities inside, symposiums talking about the vast history that Texas has, all the cultures that come together to form the culture we know as Texan today. And then, end it with some square dancing at Barrow, all kinds of fun. And then Barrow Brewing's having their beer festival next, the following weekend. I think that's going to be a success. From everything I've seen, there's a lot of online enthusiasm about it. I've run across their ad. I'm apparently in the target market. I've run across their ad a couple of times, and so I've been seeing all the shares, and there's hundreds and hundreds of shares and everything, so that's exciting. And the normals. I want to mention that the new chamber leadership is actively meeting about their events in the fall. Art fair, they've been meeting about that, and then the stroll committee, which is completely new, a new committee rather, getting together and meeting soon. I'll be meeting with them, so hopefully we'll start getting these events going soon. So, yeah. That's all.
Questions, please, or comments?
Yeah.
In regard to the Main Street development, do you foresee an impact to tourism? And if you do, what's your plan?
I think that there is so part of, the conversations being had part of our goal with this is to try to connect the village a little bit better from a visitor standpoint, try to help them understand it, help them see the flow through the village, what you can do and all of that. And I think the Main Street project, in my opinion, is going to make that even easier. When a visitor comes here, there'll be a very direct and very literal path through the village to experience the village. I think that there is, and I would love to, in the budget this coming year, it's something that when I got here, I was really wishing that someone had done something big when the highway reopened. I would love to do something like that when Main Street reopens. I would love to set aside money in the marketing budget around the time, maybe before or after Main Street is reopened. You don't want to say that we're back in business, because we've always been in business, right? But to have some sort of celebration or some sort of I really don't know what it is. I'd like to discuss it though. So yeah.
Yeah, but what I'm talking about is
during all of it.
Yeah, during the renovation of Main Street, do you foresee a drop in tourism? If you do, what's your plan to get us through that?
Genuinely, I don't know that it's going to have a negative impact. I don't think so. And the reason being is people are generally used to construction and change and that sort of thing when they get here. With the exception of, it is hard when a business is blocked off. But with proper signage, I'm sure they've got that, and proper direction of pedestrians, I don't think it'll be an issue at all. People expect construction. It's not going to deter them from coming here. And I think also if we maintain a positive air, I think a big part of trouble you can get into is if the community, and I think we as sort of figures in the community have an obligation to maintain a sense of positivity. I heard someone tell visitors, I had to sort of interject, but tell them that, another construction project's coming. And I think that's the wrong mentality to have. I think the mentality should be one of positivity and one that shows the visitors that we're excited for what's coming, right? And if we tell them, there's another construction project, we never get to tell them how great it will be. And we potentially inadvertently convince them not to come back. If we tell them how great it will be and invite them back and say, hey, come back and come and see us again when it's all done, it'd be awesome. And I think that's our plan forward is to try to maintain that positivity in the community. So, thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, Don, on the presentation that Chadley brings every month on the 1st, is there a way we can put like a calendar up to show, the outline of what's coming up in the month? And absolutely. And I always know that Chadley's looking
John, in response to your question, I think you're going to see continued push on social media to present the message that we're open for business. I think you're going to see probably some dropped messages, periodically providing updates on the project to let people know what's going on, to let people know what's going to be happening as a result of what happens. The other thing we're using is we're seizing on the opportunity with local media. We've probably done 3 or 4 interviews already on the project itself, and have got some pretty good publicity out there as far as that goes. But that's going to be a continued effort for the next 12 months to maintain the message that we're open for business. Yes, there will be some inconvenience, but at the end of the day, the horizon's bright.
Yeah, because we're going to breach our supply shock before the October. That's the level of concerns. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or suggestions? I learned today that Channel 6 gave a free advertisement for this weekend. I think that's pretty good. Free. Thanks.
And Mayor, you're performing this weekend, right, as part of that event?
The next one is number 7, ordinances. A, consider approval of the first reading of an ordinance of the Village of Salado, Texas, to annex under Chapter 43 of the Texas Local Government Code the Williams Road right-of-way from West Village Road to Farm to Market Road 2484, owned by Bell County, as further described in Exhibit A in Bell County, Texas, lying adjacent and contiguous to the present corporate limits of the Village of Salado and the village's extraterritorial jurisdiction in Bell County, and to the incorporated municipal boundaries of the Village of Salado, Texas, including the following findings of fact: effective date, repealers, severability, and proper notice, and meeting. Ron?
Yes, sir, Mayor, members of council, this is the first reading of the annexation of Williams Road, the right-of-way of Williams Road, from basically West Village to 2484. We've been through the required public hearings. We've talked a lot about this, and this is basically, we're at the finish line. You have to approve this ordinance on 2 readings. It's scheduled for this particular meeting and your next meeting, and then we'll be done with the process. So it's before you for the Williams Road right-of-way.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion for the first reading with the approval of it. Motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in discussion? Question has been called. All in favor, raise your hand. Likewise. Passes. Number B, consider approval of the first reading of an ordinance of the Village of Salado, Texas, to annex under Chapter 43 of the Texas Local Government Code the Salado School Road right-of-way from West Village Road to Thomas Arnold Road, portions of which are owned by Bell County and the Salado Independent School District, as further described in Exhibit A in Bell County, Texas, lying adjacent and contiguous to the present corporate limits of the Village of Salado and the village's extraterritorial jurisdiction in Bell County, into the incorporated municipal boundaries of the Village of Salado, Texas, including the following findings of fact: effective date, repealer, severability, and proper notice and meeting. John?
Yes, sir, Mayor, members of the board, this is basically the annexation of Salado School Road in the right-of-way, as it says forth. So it's before you tonight for consideration.
I'll entertain a motion for consideration of approval, please. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
On the first item, I'm going to ask a question there, but on both of these, or is it just the second one that the school district is already, have they already approved, or is there any approval process by the school district required for any of these actions?
No, sir, really there isn't. Their approval came when they submitted the petition to annex. Yes, sir. And in these particular situations, these were actually city-initiated annexations, and we're about to do the school district annexations.
And Don, the legal has been thoroughly vetted on this, and Their side and
Combed,
our side.
recombed, and, yes. On all of these.
Rodney, this question that you asked, if you also want to ask the same question for the freshman?
Yeah, they were.
Combined, okay, fine. Okay. Yeah, question has been called. All in favor, raise your hand, please. Opposed, likewise. Passes. Number C, consider approval of the first reading of an ordinance of the,
I believe John was the, made the motion. Amber was the second, third. The city secretary was not. We need to speak up a little more, she's not hearing good.
I heard Amber was signature.
Yeah, John made the motion. Okay. Thank you, sorry. Sorry.
no, that's fine, and that is good, because not only does she have to hear, this is being streamed, and it's important because other people around the community who could not come to this meeting tonight have an opportunity to see what business has been conducted. Thank you, John, for doing that. Number C, consider approval of the first reading of an ordinance of the Village of Salado, Texas, to voluntarily annex under Chapter 43 of the Texas Local Government Code property owned by the Salado Independent School District on Williams Road, as further described in Exhibits A and B in Bell County, Texas, lying adjacent and contiguous to the present corporate limits of the Village of Salado and the village's extraterritorial jurisdiction in Bell County, into the incorporated municipal boundaries of the Village of Salado, Texas, including the following: findings of fact, effective date, repealers, severability, and proper notice and meeting. John?
Yes, sir, Mayor, members of the board, this is the first reading of the ordinance annexing the Salado ISD school properties. As you know, they petitioned us to annex these properties. In this particular case, we're talking about the properties on Williams Road, meaning the high school and also the new school site. It is before you tonight. The supplemental, the items that were loose, that were at your dais, or your seat when you sat down tonight, these are the final ordinances with all attachments and all of that. There's really no change than what was in your packet. In fact, you've got a complete listing of attachments. It's before you tonight for consideration. Public hearings have been held.
Number D, consider approval of the first reading of an ordinance of the Village of Salado, Texas, to voluntarily annex.
Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me go back to that then, please. This is number C, consider approval of the first reading of an ordinance of the Village of Salado, and so on. You gonna make a motion of it? I know what we're doing, I just want you to be reminded of this. No, I'm not gonna read it all the way. But is there a motion to approve this?
So,
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion?
I have a question on this one, which will also the next one too. Is there any part of the school properties that's being excluded, or is the entirety of the project? I mean, I don't see the maps. I mean, they're in here. But
The entirety, yes.
okay.
In both cases.
Any other discussion, please? Do I hear the call for the question? All in favor, raise your hand, please. Opposed, likewise. Passes. Now, number D. Consider approval of the first reading of an ordinance of the Village of Salado, Texas, to voluntarily annex under Chapter 43 of the Texas Local Government Code property owned by the Salado Independent School District on Salado School Road and Thomas Arnold Road, as further described in Exhibits A and B in Bell County, Texas, lying adjacent and contiguous to the present corporate limits of the Village of Salado and the village's extraterritorial jurisdiction in Bell County, and to the incorporated municipal boundaries of the Village of Salado, Texas, including the following: findings of fact, effective date, repealers, severability, and proper notice and meeting. Don?
Yes, sir, Mayor, members of the board, this is the last annexation ordinance, the first reading of the final annexation ordinance, which basically brings in the school district's properties that are located on Salado School Road and Thomas Arnold. As you know, we're not annexing that portion of Thomas Arnold, we're only annexing Salado School Road, but they're basically, their frontage on both. It's before you tonight for consideration. We've had the required public hearings. Again, you have a complete packet behind you with exhibits and everything you need to approve.
Questions to Don, please? consider a motion, please.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second if I wasn't first.
Second if I went first.
Discussion, please.
Question.
Question has been called. All in favor, raise your hand, please. Opposed, likewise, passes.
Sure, you can do it.
Number E, consider approval of an ordinance of the Village of Salado, Texas, abandoning public right-of-way for property adjoining the Salado Inn on the creek and located just northwest of the intersection at or near Royal Street and College Street, and providing for findings of repealer, severability, and effective date, and proper notice and meeting. John?
Yes, sir, Mayor, members of the board, this is an item that we talked about at length at the last board meeting. It's a situation where the village was approached about basically abandoning and transferring ownership of two strips of right-of-way that are located in the downtown area. In particular, they're located north of Royal Street, between Royal Street and the creek. And they're part of the original map of Salado. As we talked at the last meeting, the subject portions of right-of-way flank the northern and southern boundaries of a 0.61 acre tract of land owned by the Salado Inn on the Creek, which is located behind Barrow's Brewing. The title research submitted to the village and reviewed indicates the portions of the right-of-way are publicly owned, despite the fact that in the past at least two individuals have attempted to claim adverse possession of the public properties, which you know you cannot claim adverse possession of the public property. In fact, the Salado Inn on the Creek is currently paying taxes on the properties that have filed an adverse action. The owner of the Salado Inn on the Creek has requested the village abandon and transfer ownership of the section of right-of-way of the Salado Inn on the Creek. We're not closing this property. It actually is an abandonment and a transfer. As the subject properties are surrounded by property on three sides and really have no access to public street or planned public use, the village staff, as you know, at the last meeting, talked about moving forward with potentially abandoning these properties. Subsequent to our discussion a couple of weeks ago, we have been in conversation with an adjacent property owner to one of these strips, and that individual is very concerned about the legal descriptions that were provided, with the original paperwork on this matter, and concerned about the accuracy of those. And I think with that concern having been raised, it makes sense that the city take the extra step. We visited with our legal counsel about the descriptions that were provided, and they were comfortable for the purposes of what we were doing. But since a concern has been raised, the feeling is that we probably ought to take the extra step and require a survey be provided to the village that gives us a more accurate legal description of the property. At the same time, we feel that there's probably a need to take one more shot at the title work just to confirm the public ownership on that, as we've received some conflicting information from the county, former county commissioner about this particular issue. However, we have researched that information this afternoon late and believe that still is an indication that there's public ownership on this. But that said, rather than getting into a long drawn-out discussion on this issue, I think it's important that we get the facts in front of us first, being a good survey, a good legal description, and confirm public ownership, and then take action on this ordinance. So what we're recommending tonight is that you move forward with a motion that says the following, and that is with the understanding that it's the intent of the Board of Aldermen to abandon the subject property and transfer ownership once an acceptable survey and legal description are provided to the village and public ownership is confirmed. That you're approving a motion to continue consideration of this ordinance until the first meeting in July or sooner to allow for Mr. Lowry, the Inn on the Creek, to provide this information to the village at his cost and not at the village's cost. So that's what we're recommending you move forward with. You're not approving the ordinance, you're basically continuing consideration of that ordinance until we get the necessary information to make sure it is public property and to make sure we have the right description, because we do not, as a village, want to take any action that could potentially abandon somebody else's property. We don't think that's going to be the case, but we think we need to have that better description in hand to make sure that is not the case. So it's before you tonight, Mayor, with that motion on.
Thank you very much. One of our citizens would like to speak to this. Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Alderman, for this chance to address you. My name is Darlene Walsh, and my husband is over here, so Michael Walsh. We live at 1001 Mill Creek Drive. Before Salado incorporated in 2000, Bell County Commissioners abandoned on April 6, 1998, a 0.208 acre tract of land along West College Street, and also the unimproved alleys and roads in that area, and filed all these documents with the county clerk. At the direction of then Commissioner Tim Brown, as owners of the Spring House at the corner of Royal and College Streets, we completed a new meets and bounds survey for the entire property to include the adjacent 0.104 acre section of College Street and half the alley along the back property line. We've paid taxes on this property for the past 20 years. The 1998 survey property description in your packet today does not reflect accurate current ownership. I passed out a plat map derived from the Bell County Appraisal District and the names of the owners. We therefore request this abandonment be postponed until an accurate and current survey of the slivers be provided by the village or by Mr. Lowry. We recently had the survey descriptions reviewed by a different title company attorney. In that title company attorney's opinion, it does not accurately reflect the slivers up for abandonment tonight. Therefore, if approved as is today by the board, it would result in the village giving this property to Mr. Lowry, our half of the alleyway, which we've paid taxes on now for the past 20 years. In addition, since we have a concrete ramp within the 9.5-foot alley we claimed in 1998, if you approve the existing abandonment as described, or refuse to recognize our ownership of the alley, then you will have greatly devalued our property, we believe. We request that you abide by the current Texas abandonment law, which has been given to all of you tonight, and postpone this decision. We never signed a legal petition authorizing this abandonment. Also, Don told me today he had amended the ordinance he's asking you to pass without a 72-hour notice, as is required by the Open Meeting Act law. And lastly, because you don't have an accurate and current survey description of the land Mr. Lowry is requesting be abandoned, we're asking you please postpone this decision. Thank you for your time and for your careful consideration of this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, please, to Don?
Mayor, very quickly, just for the record, an ordinance can be amended and changed and drafted all the way up until the moment it's approved. The caption remains the same. The ordinance content can change up until the moment it's approved without 72 hours notice. Just needs to be properly posted and then we're going to take action.
I have a question too. Along with the new survey, can we just request